since 1997. Ministers say the number of people living in absolute poverty has fallen by more than 500,000, and pensioner poverty remains close to historically low levels. Absolute poverty is when a household doesn't have sufficient income to sustain even a basic, acceptable standard of living. Relative poverty is when that income is considerably lower than the median level. Our social affairs correspondent Michael Buchanan has been speaking to pensioner Flo Singleton, who lives in relative poverty.
I mean, I have worked. I'm not scrounged all my life. I have worked. Part-time jobs only, because you have to fit it in round kids, don't you? And you end up, because you haven't paid a full pension, you end up with, well, it's enough to live on, put it like that. No luxuries, of course. Heat or eat, isn't it? If you go out, you don't have to have your heating on, do you?
So you go on the bus just to keep warm?
If you go on the buses, it don't cost you nothing, does it?
Well, this report into poverty comes a day after Alan Milburn, the Labour head of the Social Mobility Commission, resigned, along with 3 other board members, in protest at what they said was the government's lack of progress towards building a fairer Britain, which some say is in contrast to Theresa May's pledge to create a country which works for everyone.
I want to explain what a country that works for everyone means. In a country that works for everyone, a vision of a country that works not for the privileged few. The privileged few. A country that works for everyone. And to make Britain a country that works not for the privileged few, and we will make Britain a country that works not for a privileged few, not by the interests of the privileged few, but for everyone, but for every one of us. Under my leadership, this government's priorities are those of ordinary working class people. The Conservative Party will put itself completely, absolutely, and decisively, unequivocally at the service of ordinary working people, working class people, that puts the interests of ordinary working class people first. If you're from an ordinary working class family, life is much harder than many people in Westminster realise. It doesn't matter where you were born or how much your parents earn, whoever you are and wherever you're from. Regardless of their background or that of their parents, if you work hard and do the right thing, you will be able to go as far as you can. We must make Britain a country that works not for a privileged few, but for every single one of us.
Well, let me introduce you to John Bird. He's been homeless, a prisoner, and in his words, a loser, cheat and a fraud. He's now Lord John Bird, an independent peer. Also with us, Conservative MP Rob Halfin. He's at Westminster. Today, he's making a speech on poverty and inequality. He's also chair of the Education Select Committee. And Debbie Abrahams is with us, Labour's Work and Pensions spokeswoman. Thank you all very much for talking to us. Rob Halfin, first of all, you are a Conservative MP who is seen as being in touch with normal people, working class people. I want to ask you, how proud are you that under your government having a job is not enough to escape poverty?
Well, I think we need to be honest, identify where there is social injustice, which there is in certain parts of our society. We need to also be honest in recognising the government have done some good things in terms of introducing the national living wage, which means low-income workers are thousands of pounds better off, cutting taxes for lower earners, taking over 3 million people out of income tax altogether. So I think you need to have a balance there. But what I want to do is identify social injustice. I accept there are some, and I want the Prime Minister to reboot the social justice conservatism that she set out at the steps of Downing Street.
Are you shocked that having a job is not enough to escape poverty?
Well, I think that the job is the best route out of poverty, and we've got more people employed than ever before.
Sorry to interrupt. For some people, it isn't. They are working. They are doing the right thing. They are working, and they are still defined as living in poverty. In Britain in 2017, under your government.
Yes, but you have to weigh the whole thing up, because if those people get jobs and then they get progression in those jobs, many of them do, then they get the increases of wages. As I say, where the government has done the right thing, introducing the national living wage, for example, meaning low-income workers are thousands of pounds better off, keeping the fuel duty free is very important to workers, cutting taxes for lower earners.
They've taken that into
No,
account.
they haven't. They take into account some things. They don't take into account things like the fuel duty freeze and the cutting the income tax for low-income workers. But I'm not saying there isn't social injustice. I want to deal with that. I'm focusing on social justice in our education system, which is there are social injustice in every part of it, and I want the government to deal with that. I want the Prime Minister to refocus on social justice.
Okay, well,
I want a social justice commission at the heart of Downing Street
let me ask you
to look
about
at these problems.
Let me ask you about education then, social injustice in education. 51% of London children on free school meals get A to C in English and Maths GCSE. It's just 36% in the rest of England. Why?
Well, this is the social injustices that I'm trying to identify as Select Committee Chair. What's happening is that standards are going up, but the government needs to focus on social capital and human capital as well, and make sure that people from disadvantaged students are getting better off. We still have 1.8 million children in good or outstanding schools, more than ever, but nevertheless, nationally and in London, there is a lot of disadvantaged people who aren't benefiting from this, and that is what the kind of things that we're looking at as a committee and trying to look at solutions to help.
Let me bring in Debbie Abrahams, Labour's work and pension spokeswoman. You know that the government says the number of people in absolute poverty, and we did the definitions in the introduction at the beginning, have fallen by 500,000. That is to be welcomed, isn't it?
Of course, any moves around absolute poverty are welcome, but what we need to focus on, as you're rightly doing, Victoria, is about what this means. Can I just pick up on what Rob Halfin has said? First of all, in the budget that we've had just 2 weeks ago, the government has refused to put up the national living wage to £9 an hour in 2020, which is going to mean that people on the national living wage by then will be £900 a year worse off. Their own government analysis of the budget showed again the poorest fifth were going to be worse off and the richest were not. And the third point, Victoria, is around what Rob was saying in terms of work, the route out of poverty. It's not. We know that 4 out of 5 people in a low-paid job now will still be in a low-paid job in 10 years' time. So this is an absolute nonsense. And if we look at what's happening at the top end of the scale in terms of what the richest in society have achieved, we know that the gap between rich and poor has doubled. And this, again, from international evidence, we know is the driver for the lack of social mobility. This government has done nothing. In fact, it has made it worse, not only in terms of social mobility, but also in terms of making sure that we increase our life expectancy, the only developed country in the world where this is happening.
OK. If you were in government, would you unfreeze benefits now?
Yes, we have said that. We were very clear in the general election that we had.
OK, let me ask Rob Halfin then. Is it time to unfreeze benefits?
Well, we need to look at the benefit system in terms of the best way of getting people into work. But if I could just take issue, we were the government that introduced the national living wage. And the living wage will mean the national. We were introduced the national living wage, not the last government. It was our government that did that. And
are you going to put it up to £10 an hour then, Rob?
Thousands of people will be, the workers will be better off by thousands of pounds. We also have cut income tax for low earners, taking 3 million people out of income tax altogether.
Your own
making sure that people don't have to pay income tax until 11,500.
Let me bring in John Bird.
So what I'm saying is...
Hello.
Hello there, yeah.
What do you think needs to change?
Well, I actually think, and I think our two colleagues have shown, is that when you're in government, you've got to deliver and you've got that amount of money. When you're not in government, you don't have to deliver. But when you do get into government, you then realise there are enormous constraints. I think the real problem is that we have a problem with British capitalism. We have a problem with the marketplace. We have millions of people in Britain who are not worth an awful lot to the marketplace because the employers can't, the owners can't make enough out of them.
So what would you change?
So what we've got to try and do, and it's only going to be done through education, as the MP says, it's only through education, it's only through upping the skills. I'll give you an example. When I was a boy, just after the war, they gave us such a crap form of education that the only jobs we could get were unskilled jobs, and a lot of those were disappearing. We're in virtually the same situation.
Can I come back,
We
Victoria?
have a really weird education system that doesn't prepare children for the fourth industrial revolution. We've got a pedagogy which is really wide of the mark, and we are always making the same mistake. We fail 37% of our children who become the people who do the low-paid jobs. They become 80% of our prison population. They fill up our A&E departments. So because we fail 1 in 3 children, when are we ever going to get round to sorting out poverty?
Rob Halfin, do you want to come back on that?
Well, I think John Bird is absolutely right on this. I think what we need to do is have a huge investment in skills. The government are doing some of that. We've had 3 million apprenticeships since 2010.
Yeah, but
900,000
you've seen the
apprentices
recent
already.
figures that have dropped off.
Please, let me finish, and then Lucy, you come in. Just let me finish. What we need to do is to make sure that we have continue to invest in skills. We need to offer degree apprenticeships to every single young person who wants it. I want to get to a stage where every single person at the age of 16 is offered an apprenticeship, which they earn while they learn. There's no student debt, and they virtually guaranteed a job at the end of it. The government's doing some of that, 2.5 billion extra spent by 2020. As I say, 900,000 apprenticeships on record. But
Okay.
John Bird is absolutely right. We need to re-gear education towards skills in a big way, especially to help people from disadvantaged backgrounds.
You'll know that the number of
Victoria.
apprenticeships has dropped off since the apprenticeship levy
in the last
was brought
quarter,
in.
but
Yes.
over the last year, apprenticeships have gone up, and we have over 900,000, the
Okay,
highest
Debbie.
ever in our island's history.
Debbie Abrahams, Labour's Work and Pensions spokeswoman.
Yes, I mean, I just wanted to pick up on what we're saying about education. Absolutely right. And that's why we pledged a national education service in the same way that we provide our national health service from cradle to grave. You don't have a job for life anymore. And we need to have this ongoing thing. But we need to do something about now. This is in the long term. We need to make sure that people have a decent home at a fair rent or a fair mortgage. That's not happening. We need to make sure that people on the lowest incomes are paid adequately, and at £10 an hour is what, again, we pledge, making sure people worth £3,000 a year better off. And then we need to have a social security system that helps people now. The cuts that the government have introduced and are still to introduce is really going to be detrimental, pushing a further 1 million children into poverty in the next 5 years.
Final word to you, Rob Halfin.
Well, I think we're investing in skills. We've got to do more on social justice, something I'm very passionate about. We've got 1.8 million more children in good or outstanding skills and schools than ever before.
Then
but there's
do
a lot
something
more work
about
to be
it,
done.
Rob.
There is a lot being done, but there is more to be done. I acknowledge that.
OK, thank you. Thank you all very much. Rob Halfin, Conservative MP, Chair of the Education Select Committee, Debbie Abrahams, Labour's Work and Pension spokeswoman, and Lord John Bird, an independent peer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for getting up early to come on our programme.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, the Brexit Secretary, David Davis, has just been speaking ahead of his trip to Brussels with Theresa May. This is what he said a few seconds ago.
We've put 7 months of work, both sides, into getting to this point, and we're hoping that Mr Juncker today will give us sufficient progress so we can move on to trade talks. The decision, of course, won't be taken until the 15th of December, but that's what we're hoping for, because trade talks are of enormous importance to the United Kingdom and to Europe.
Donald Tusk was very